Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about specifically Dungeons & Dragons, how a Dungeon Master paces her game, and the film Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, and the pacing lessons that come from Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. There are no spoilers in this content for the film. All right, so in Dungeons & Dragons, we have today, we have a major problem in Dungeons & Dragons, which is the legacy and the traditions of the 70s and the 80s, and of the 70s and 80s. So basically, the traditions that were built in the 70s and 80s are all of very long-term, long-running stories, right? 4-hour games with campaigns that can last for years. And I think those are wonderful in the 70s and 80s because there really wasn't, art stunk compared to what it does today. Every single piece, all art is way better today, right? We have more money and more time and more innovation and more technology to build art. And even the art that doesn't use technology, the technology can make the components for the art cheaper. So again, you can iterate faster. Art is better today than it's ever been. We have better music, better video games, better books, better movies, better television, better everything, okay? But in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have those, so you could tell very long stories. You could use 4 hours for a game session. You could use years to tell a campaign, right? Now, what I'm saying is that those days are over. They are 100% over. Because the world is filled with amazing art, and we, especially as Americans, have the ability to do a million things cheaper, better, faster. Your Dungeons & Dragons game just doesn't have the time it used to. It doesn't have 4 hours per session. It doesn't have years to tell your campaign story. You can do it, right? You can absolutely do it, but the reality is you're going to lose. Eventually, most likely, you're going to lose players, or you're going to be stuck in a campaign that does not finish, right? Or that finishes with less than half of the people you started with, right? And I've personally seen this happen like many, many times. But the problem is today's dungeon masters, not many of them get this and they're going in the right direction, but many of them don't, right? And so there's just this old tradition of 4-hour games, years-long campaigns, and it desperately needs to die. Well, Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is a perfect way to show how modern storytelling can be brought over to Dungeons & Dragons. The pacing, so why should we pay attention to the pacing lessons of Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse? Well, the reason we should pay attention specifically to the pacing lessons that are contained within Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is because Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is by far the best Spider-Man movie ever made without exception. And there are 3 Raimi Spider-Mans, 2 the British Spider-Man, and the British actor who played Spider-Man, and then finally there's Homecoming with and all of those movies. The first 3 are good. Raimi's Spider-Mans are good. The 2 Spider-Mans with the British actor, I don't know their name for a reason. Can't even remember what their names were. Those movies were not good, in my opinion. Just not good. Right? Homecoming was fantastic. It was really, really fantastic. It's a great movie, right? But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is an absolutely stellar film that easily defeats every single Spider-Man movie that's ever been made. The reason why is it has the pacing of a comic book. It has a chaotic, aggressive, fast pace, right? It tells a story incredibly fast. Right, so the story is of Miles Morales, and in the movie we see Miles Morales' origin story within the film, but there are 5 other Spider-Man, and this isn't a spoiler, this is right on the poster. Spider-Pig, Spider-Noir, Spider-Anime, I know there's a different name there, Spider-Gwen, and I think there's one more in there. I guess there's 4. So there's 4 additional Spider-Men, right? So we get to see there are literally 6 origin storytellings in this film. It is done, each origin story is told by breaking the fourth wall and saying the origin story in the voice of the character telling the origin story right to the audience. And I loved it. And it allows the movie to get on with the story of telling an exciting adventure of Miles Morales Spider-Man with Peter Parker Spider-Man and Spider-Gwen and Spider-Noir and Spider-Pig and Spider-Anime and all of those are told they have an adventure against Fisk, which is Kingpin, right? And the movie is just, the story is told so fast, right? And it's just fantastic. It really is fantastic. Now, so the reality is the pacing lessons from it are any type of backstory, just spit it out and give the elevator pitch. You need to tell the backstory of your characters incredibly quickly, less than a minute, maybe as long as 3 minutes. So if any character in your game has a backstory, their backstory should be told in 3 minutes. And this is a big pacing lesson from the film. No secrets, all right? Okay, so basically this is a big one. With Dungeons & Dragons, every dungeon master out there wants the backstory of their villain to be secret, right? And to be exposed over time, right? But the reality is, one of the things we need to get rid of as dungeon masters in order to progress our dungeon mastering is this idea that we keep information from the players the way we keep information from player characters. There is a difference between player information and player character information. You can tell the full backstory of your villain straight to every single one of your players, and then insist and actually make sure that your player characters do not use player knowledge for their player characters. And we all need to get much better at the table of making sure that, and the thing is, we're all like, oh, this is a super cool secret about my villain that's going to be told in episode 20. Well, the reality is, what happens when you have a player who plays in your game for 8 months and gets through 16 sessions, right? And then moves to Louisiana, right? Like, my point is, people think they have all the time in the world. Today, the world moves faster than it has ever moved. You don't have 20 sessions. Tell the super cool, awesome parts of your story to your players directly as soon as the player character is introduced, and then insist that they use their player character knowledge and not their player knowledge. And this is hard work. We need to be careful about how we manage this at the table with our players. But the reality is, you just need to realize, DMs need to realize, this is not 1970, this is not 1980. You don't have years to tell your campaign. You need to get it out there. You need to tell your story as quickly as possible. And Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is living proof, in my opinion, that you can get your best story by not keeping secrets, by shotgunning your backstories as quickly as possible onto your experiencers, your game experiencers, your players, right? So there's an incredible, and so I highly recommend to every dungeon master out there, go see Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse and watch master storytellers, right, telling a story at lightning speed, and that story being exciting, being emotionally evocative, being having impact, with characters with medium depth, not super deep, right? And that is one of the things, these characters are not quite as deep as you could get with a series, right? Or with 3 movies. And if everything had been held back from the moviegoer until 3 movies were done, you'd have a little bit more deep character in Miles Morales. But it's important to understand we don't have the prolonged attention of viewers that we used to, right? And rather than bemoan it, we accept it, we learn from it, and we immediately lock it down, and we deliver our stories quickly, and we do a powerful job of delivering for our, of delivering great stories for our characters, knowing that our world has changed and the way we tell stories really needs to change, right? So I can't recommend highly enough going to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I think there's some really big lessons here that we need to tell our stories faster. One other caveat, not a caveat. I want to warn you about some pitfalls. So, I am quite aware of who Spider-Man Noir is. I am aware of who Spider-Pig is. I am aware of Peter Parker, right? And I'm also aware of Miles Morales. Spider-Gwen and Spider-Anime, I don't know those characters. I've never read their comic books, and I don't know their backstories. And when they were presented very, very quickly in the movie, when it was done, I still didn't feel like I knew who Spider-Gwen was, right? So just realize you're not going to get 100% understanding from all of your players, right? But context is king, and the benefits you will get from telling a fast-paced story far, far, far outweigh the depth you will get in having a more patient and slow-paced game, which will probably never finish, which will almost certainly not finish with the people that you started with, and that really today's fast-paced environment absolutely will not allow, right? And and I'm very much talking from experience. About, I would say about 3-4 years ago, I started in a game that was extremely grand and had an amazing, DM had literally dozens of pages of notes, and about half that game you can find on online. And now today, most of the players in that game are completely different, and the game is no longer aired on online, and it's just pure proof. Me and this other DM, who's an excellent DM, who just has a fundamentally misunderstanding about how stories are told, really disagreed. I said fast-paced game, he said slow-paced game, and here we are, literally 3-4 years later, his game is still going on, right? But it's dropped off of online play because not enough people were watching it. And then also, in addition to that, there are almost completely new players in it. And so, there was two worldviews directly opposed. And I think you can see the proof missing online, right? So, I'd love to debate this with anybody who thinks that long games can still be run. The reality is, it's like the Holy Grail. Like, people want to believe in it, but the reality is, games that run long periods, the only person who's having fun is the DM, who really doesn't care that the people are falling out, and doesn't care also that there's a high probability that all the people who are investing time in that game will probably never see the end, because good fortune or bad fortune is going to tear that game apart. The world does not allow long campaigns. It really doesn't. So, and I will guarantee you, for every successful story you can tell me where you were in a game that ran 3, 5, 7, 10 years, I can show you 50 where they started in 2 years in, and most of the players never got to see the end of those campaigns. This is really, in my opinion, this is a done issue. Tell your stories quickly, and in order to do that, go see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse to learn the pacing lessons that should be learned. Thank you. Take care. And please consider liking and subscribing.